Hi, come on down to Road Warrior Herbal Remedies, where we have all your herbal remedies. We have an incredible selection of pods, spores, leaves, and blooms, all hand-curated by our skilled team of Cretaceous-era dinosaurs. People always say to me, they say, "Kirvin, you can't expect to move product at these prices. You must be crazy." How crazy, you ask? I'm so crazy I don't even have prices. That's right, I deal in volume. So hurry in today and claim these incredible botanical treasures that, to reiterate, are not currently for sale. Right across the street from the food court. Where the hell did that come from? Right across the street from Ang's Sand Shop. Hurry, hurry, hurry!
Never forget to go home.
Okay, now that the Blaze Farm is operating at minimum viable product, I'm gonna shift gears. It is at time of recording October. It will not be at time of release at the rate that things are going, but I have a project for the month, and I want to see if I can pull it off. I would like to be able to actually populate the city a little bit more. My plan is I would like to try and put in one building a day, minimum, ideally. I might need more than one a day, but one building a day for the entire month, and we're going to see what the hell happens. It might not work, considering it is October 3rd and I have not started yet. In my defense, these people kept distracting me. I thought Casey would be there too, but no, he's doing something else. They kept distracting me, so yeah. Starting with probably the kitchen. I think it's probably the kitchen. That one's desperately needed. That or a bigger bamboo farm. But I think I'm going to do kitchen. Alright, let's try and figure this out. I wanted to start with the kitchen for a couple of reasons. One is just I have nowhere to put my food. I don't have like a food box marked out anywhere in my main storage building, which was very much intentional because I was planning to make a kitchen. But also Casey just keeps giving me food because he can't turn the machine off and it just keeps making food. But the other reason was that I didn't really, with a few exceptions, I didn't go into any of these buildings with a real plan. And I wanted to start on something that I thought I could actually sort of do all the way through. Most of these buildings don't end up with a full interior and a purpose, but I wanted to start with something that did, and a kitchen seemed like something that I was fairly confident I could wing the vibe of without having to refer to too many blueprints. Of course, I say that as I'm putting in the top floor that to this day, several months later, still stands empty, but that's beside the point. But from an actual architectural standpoint, one of the interesting challenges of this is that it's right next to the smeltery that has those mud wall columns, which meant that I couldn't actually use solid blocks in any part that was actually immediately next to those, because otherwise the wall would connect and the whole thing would, look bad. So basically I decided instead I was going to try and create windows in certain spots with slabs and stairs in sort of strategic places and a couple of flower pots to sort of create the illusion that there is a contiguous shape there without actually having a contiguous shape there. There are a couple spots in the city where I try to use decorated pots for like road signs, like the smeltery has a fire symbol outside of it, and this one is, I kind of had to fudge this one, but I think wheat health potion sort of says there's food here well enough. And sort of your staple city thing is you've always got some sort of stall with some food and some fruit in it, so that if there's ever a high-speed chase down your street, the protagonists have something to knock over, and the angry fruit merchant can shake their fist as they speed away. And of course, putting some melons on some various sized armor stands and then moving them in place with the protractor to sort of give the illusion of produce. Now, one of the important aspects to this city, I think, is that it is difficult to navigate. I don't really focus on that in a lot of these buildings because it is one of those jigsaw puzzle made of zip ties thing that you have to sort of have all of the parts in place before you can actually start assembling it. So this one just opens up onto the street. That will be changing later, I'm sure. That jump cut was, of course, editing out the 15 minutes of me moving all of my food in here, which I should have probably done after I paused the time lapse. Went back and forth on whether or not I wanted this to be a fireplace or a door into another room. Ultimately decided on a fireplace and a crock pot, and I imagine that chimney above it will be probably used to dispense food directly into the crock pot. I'm not trying to make my own The Machine here, but it'd be nice to have, and that's sort of why this is right next to the smeltery, is in case I need to put food directly in there. Originally, I was going to decorate this like a dining area, but ultimately decided that would probably be better saved for the second floor, so I just kept this as storage and cooking. Went a little less ambitious on the second building. I went for more of the classic straight vertical building with a little less space to fill because I didn't really have a solid plan for what this one was going to be. So I pulled in some similar designs from like the bamboo farm for the base and some of the columns from the smelter across the street. But I didn't really have a huge idea what this was going to be, so I tried to sort of leave it open-ended. I think this is probably going to be where my anvil goes, because blacksmith in between armory and smeltery seems like a fairly reasonable location to me. Went for a simple interior on this one as well, again leaving it sort of open-ended, and because there's a lot more outdoor space on this, it's more likely that whatever purpose this building serves, i.e. blacksmithing, is probably conducted outside, and the inside is just sort of originally there for storage and later probably reconverted for emergency housing. This one's also fairly straightforward, just straight vertical. I've had this spot and the one next to it marked out for a little while just to fill out the sides of the street a little bit more. I went back and forth on the design for this one a couple of times. You can see in places it has sort of similar motifs to some of the buildings next to it, which I try to avoid wherever possible so it doesn't look too repetitive. But when you only have so many patterns, and especially patterns that work in such a small space, ultimately I decided to make this one quite a bit taller than the surrounding buildings, both because I may or may not just be making the surrounding buildings taller, but also because it has so little space per floor that in order to actually get the most space out of it, obviously you'd want to have a lot of floors. And with a building like this, there are a lot of good spots to put window ledges and hanging plants for example, if you need to scale the side of a building to get inside of a different building, hypothetically. And this one was where I started running into problems. I'd used up all of my pre-marked spaces, so I had to sort of on the fly decide the size and the shape of this building, which created some issues. First and foremost, you can see the line there for the render distance blocker. Currently there's a plan to have some sort of aqueduct system through there, and that means that's as far as that building can go with a little bit of buffer space, because I don't know what the aqueduct is going to look like, and if I put a building there and then it turns out the aqueduct has to go through it, then I have to tear down the building and start over, which I don't like doing. And then this is sort of where I got stuck. I think I tried to do too many different things at once here that I probably should have split across different buildings. I put in a balcony, and then I put in a balcony at a separate layer, and then I had to make the roof square again because otherwise there'd be a big gap in the skyline, so I tried to come up with some ways to support that. Ultimately wasn't too thrilled with any of them and just sort of tore it down and started over, which of course is the exact thing I was trying to avoid by making the building this size in the first place. But I sort of eventually landed on something that's okay, and I think I can live with this. So having sort of realized my problem with the aqueduct, I moved into the yellow zone where the aqueduct is quite far away and started putting in a building next to the wheat farm. And this is the first of many buildings that you will see that just completely covers up the side of another building that I spent a lot of unnecessary time detailing. But unlike the main street in the green zone, which has some sort of back alleys between buildings coming off of it, this is itself sort of a back alley side street, and so I'm not too concerned about leaving any breathing room between a lot of these buildings, and this can be more of a contiguous structure. To the point that I've already actually marked out sort of the plan of where the next building is going to go. You can see that line of mud brick next to it was sort of my reference guide for how far this building should go. But even still, if you look very closely at the side there, you can see once again I have still spent time detailing that side, even though I know it's going to get covered up because I can't leave well enough alone, I guess. But those windows don't last long. Now over here I made a couple of mistakes. One, I put in a window that is going to get immediately covered up by the building next to it. But two, you can see I'm putting in some green plants, and I've also made this mistake with the mud farm. This is the yellow zone. We can't have green plants in the yellow zone. Fortunately, I do eventually come to my senses and swap that azalea for an oxeye daisy and a dandelion. Not a lot of yellow plants, of course, I'm realizing as I'm making the yellow zone. Now, because I started this project a little late, I actually ended up doing the 6th and 7th buildings at the same day, sort of alternating back and forth between them to sort of make up for some of the deficit. Now, see, I bet you thought that window with the oxeye daisy was going to be the one getting covered up, but in fact, it's the window in the very back of this building, which, like, there's an argument to be made that technically I'm just adding on to the first building, but, I see them as two previously independent buildings that were stuck together to make room later. I also tried just to bring a little more yellow into it. I'm trying to use some scaffolding and like stripped bamboo blocks. Like there's just stacks of thatch outside of this because there's really not a lot of yellow available to me. And I don't know if I ever showed this, but I do have an auto crafter that automatically turns wheat and mud into packed mud, and that's sort of what's going to end up going in this building because it's between the mud machine and the wheat farm. Probably gonna have to pipe the wheat through that building I just built, but what can you do? And by sheer coincidence, I'm sure the balcony of this building is at about just the same height as the roof of the building across the street. And of course, this being an oblong building, it creates some problems with trying to do this design in the middle. It's a lot easier when it's smaller and I can just repeat it on every side, but when it's like this, about halfway in, I start to think, maybe I'll put another building next to this one and just cover up this side too. And once again, these buildings can really only go so far back because that line of torches and end rods down there is more or less where the aqueduct is going to go. So while I have relative freedom in the width, I don't have a lot of freedom in the depth of these buildings. So let's just get away from the aqueduct entirely and not have to tiptoe around that. Over here in the orange zone, in between the gunpowder and the iron farm, I think this is going to be a pumpkin farm, if for no other reason that just pumpkins are orange and it's the orange zone. There's not a lot of reason for it to be where it is. Pumpkins don't really need to go next to anything, but it's an easy farm to build, and my last couple of buildings haven't had a whole lot of functionality to them, so I figured this would be a quick and easy farm to add, and I need pumpkins for my shulker reloader, so 2 birds with 1 stone. I did time-lapse building the pumpkin farm, but it's not worth anyone's time. You know how a pumpkin farm works. The only important detail is that the pumpkins are visible growing through those windows on the bottom, and use your imagination. Now with the smeltery now online, most of my bamboo is going towards filling up those furnaces, and my current bamboo farm is not really producing fast enough to keep up with the task, so I need a bigger bamboo farm. And obviously my current bamboo farm is kind of in the perfect spot because it's next to the bone meal, so I can pipe bone meal into it to grow it manually, and it's next to my storage building, so I can have somewhere to put all the bamboo, and it's next to the smeltery so that the bamboo can go in and be used as fuel. So I'm just building this one right next to it because, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I try to keep it kind of close to the original bamboo building with sort of the arched base and then a row of columns and then more arches. I deviate a little bit. The main distinction is I added A, some more windows so that you can actually see the bamboo, and B, a maintenance access point, balcony, something, so that you can actually get in, because there's literally no way to get into the pre-existing bamboo farm. Now, as with the previous bamboo farm, I was slightly concerned that having windows would lead to sometimes bamboo falling out the windows and getting stuck and not getting picked up, but my concerns were quickly alleviated because this thing makes too much bamboo, and it's actually a mercy for me that I'm losing some of it. This building is nothing particularly new design-wise. It's sort of what I consider the default style of the mud brick walls on the outside and the plain mud in the middle, and then a design up the center. But the location is very important. I've talked a lot about controlling line of sight in the city, especially between different colored zones. And this road leading directly away from the pumpkin farm connects the orange zone to where the brown zone is planned to be with the pillager outpost. And this building is basically just designed to visually isolate the brown zone and the orange zone from one another. Basically, you can't see one from the other until you round this corner past this building. And at that point, they'll either be looking one of 2 places. They'll be looking straight down the alleyway, in which case all they'll see will be brown, effectively, or they'll turn slightly to the right and they'll see orange mixed with a little bit of brown, like everywhere else in the orange zone is, as we will see later when I start expanding the palette, which is coming up shortly. Which naturally leads us to the other half of that equation on the other side of the street. And honestly, this is one of the couple that I've done that I'm not sure I'm completely happy with. I feel like the balcony needs to be, it looks bottom heavy, basically. The balcony, I think, needs to be higher up, and the top needs to be not quite so to scale with the base. I might have to go back and redo that one, which is, again, something I've been trying to avoid, but I think this is a fairly minor change. And now that those buildings are in, we can actually start adding in the palette of the orange and the brown zone. And the podzol is very good transition material between both. It's going to feature fairly prominently in the orange zone, a little less so in the brown zone because it's supposed to be more dead, but it is enough orange and enough brown that it can fit in either. And because this is a transition area, it's probably going to be the most predominant topsoil block in the palette. Creative expression is as much a learning experience as anything else, and I think this is a prime example of that. Like, for example, I learned not to put an archway on top of vertical stripes and then recess 2 blocks and try an open concept window, and then do an inverted archway and then put 2 more windows on top of that because, as you're about to see, well, it just looks like a jack-o'-lantern that's super stoked to be here. This one, I think, needs a rework. Again, not a major rework, but it needs something different. Bare minimum, it gave me a backdrop to expand the palette in the orange zone a little more and get it actually orange in more places. So, you know, more podzol near the buffer area and some pumpkins for decoration and jack-o'-lanterns for lighting in amongst the pumpkins. And because a lot of the brown zone is lower, and those pumpkins are so far back along the road, when you're in the brown zone, you really can't see the orange pumpkins from the end of that street, so it keeps the illusion by and large intact. And once I was out of sightline from that transition area, I started mixing in the red sand, which is actually orange and not brown with a little bit of orange, so I think it makes for a more vibrant orange zone than you would otherwise get. But you also can't do just red sand because you can't plant flowers on it, and that's where you need the podzol and the coarse dirt, because the only thing you can really plant on red sand is dead bushes, and they've got their place, but I wouldn't want to live in a whole zone of them. Of course, that is just the brown zone. I had one more thing on my list for this area of the orange zone, and it was pretty much the only thing that you need to have near a pumpkin farm, and that was the egg farm, because you take the pumpkin and the egg and the sugar and you make pumpkin pie. No reason for me to do that because, again, there's the machine, but an egg farm is a very simple design, so I wanted to switch things up a little bit. So I opted, instead of just putting it at the same level as everything else, I went up 5 blocks. We already have some elevation changes in the city, but not quite nearly as many as I would like to have, and since the sugarcane farm and the gunpowder farm and the start of the bee farm are already at this level, I figured this is as good a place as any to start, especially, again, with this being a very straightforward and small building as well, which meant that building a platform underneath of it at a higher level would be easier than if I, say, tried to do it with the, pumpkin farm, for example. I was going to time-lapse the inner workings of the chicken farm, but I mean, it's a chicken farm. Unless you're Jared Hess, I think you know how a chicken farm works by now. I have half my chickens making eggs, I have the other half making more chickens, and then when those grow up, they die and they turn into meat and feathers. The only difference is that most of the time this farm uses lava, I'm using powdered snow. It's a little bit slower and it doesn't pre-cook the chicken, but the crockpot doesn't care, and it also doesn't start fires, which is, I think, an acceptable trade-off when half your city is made out of wood. Also, having a bunch of raw chicken gives me something to just throw in the smelter every once in a while and burn through some of my excess bamboo from my overflowing bamboo farm. Now, of course, the problem with developing over there is that because it's so close to the bee farm and because the bee farm hasn't been developed yet, I can't really expand much over that way either because I don't know how much space the bee farm needs. So we're back over here along this street that I know is not going to bump into anything, and we're working on a building next to the iron farm. And since the iron farm is already a little bit developed in this respect, I thought I might try and make this one of those puzzle buildings you really got to think about how to get into. So of course, with this, you have to go up that ladder and then up onto the top floor of the iron farm and then jump out a window and onto that balcony. And I gotta pause the replay whenever I go to my storage room because it always unloads the chunks in the background and then they're just flickering. And there are ways in the replay mod to edit around that, but I really don't like using the replay mod interface. Like, it's just the worst. And I don't have a whole lot else to say about this building. It's pretty basic, so I don't care how much time I burn complaining about that. Now, you're probably asking yourself, Kirvin, where the hell are we? And we are actually just a little bit past the meadow on the west side of Moer in what is going to be at some point the blue zone. Now, I don't have a lot of plans for the blue zone and the red zone and the purple zone and very few plans for the brown zone, so I don't know what all is going over here, but I have to imagine there will be at least one building, so I'm making at least one building. But the main reason we're out here is just I wanted to get sort of far away from things so I could experiment with some different shapes, like having a stairwell that just goes to a split level basement, and then just having a building with a big basement. And I wanted to be able to experiment with that without risking that basement bumping into a building that already exists. I didn't do the basement, to be clear, but I wanted to see if the stairwell idea would work. I'm thinking about I might at some point come back when I'm not building one building every 24 hours and put like a speakeasy or something in there. I think would be amusing. You know, all those Roman Carthaginian speakeasies. Now, this part of the yellow zone on the board was originally slated to be a cobblestone generator because I need cobblestone to make gravel, to make coarse dirt, to make mud for the mud machine. But the mud machine just has that integrated natively, and I don't have really much of a demand for cobblestone otherwise that would really justify making a separate cobblestone generator. But something that works on a similar principle and is very easy to make out of or back into a cobblestone generator as needed is a basalt generator. Now, I need a little bit of basalt here and there. I use it in patches in the road, but the other thing you can do with basalt is you can pulverize it back into tuff, and Dewey is making a whole building out of tuff. It's never going to get finished, but I'm the only one with the self-awareness to realize that, so I'm going to offload all this tuff for millions of dollars. Now, this might seem a bit radical, but I do like trying to add a little bit more yellow to the yellow zone in places, and it can be difficult because we don't currently have a lot of options for yellow in the game, but wheat and bamboo are fairly prevalent in the lost city of Moer, and I find that bamboo trapdoors and especially these bamboo hanging signs really work well for just something to go between buildings. I don't know what they're supposed to be. They're not clotheslines because we have a clothesline and we know what it looks like, but it's something. And I try mixing in some yellow wool in places. I think it might be a little too bright, but you work with what you got. And I will actually show you the mechanism for this basalt farm, because it's not a vanilla farm. It's literally just a shell dredger on 2 end rods and just a basalt generator. I eventually go back and sort of needlessly complicate it by having a circuit that like locks the hopper if the basalt hasn't regenerated yet. But that's just like flavor. You don't really need to do that. We're about halfway through the project at this point, and I think I'm starting to get a hang of what works and what kind of doesn't. You can see some of the things I've tried in earlier buildings that didn't quite work coming back in this one, but slightly better proportioned in a way that I think is tolerable. There is one thing about this building I don't like, and you might see it yourself. Those windows with that sort of column in the middle, again, 2 eyes and a nose and a big old mouth, and that is perhaps why I decide that this balcony area here cannot be allowed to stay like that and must instead become a tiny door. But aside from that, I think the balcony works a lot better here than it has on some of my other previous attempts. And a little more orange in the bottom left there, you can see I've put in a cocoa bean farm, which didn't seem worth time-lapsing because it's a cocoa bean farm. You press the button and the logs pop off and the cocoa bean comes out. And yeah, I was not actually that happy with that design on the side of the crafter building, so we're covering it up. And this is, you may be able to tell around the time in October that the openness of my schedule that I had previously foreseen was not so open, and some of my buildings I started sort of blitzing through very quickly, which I think is fine. They don't all have to be very complicated. Some of them are just there to fill the skyline. But I did want to decorate this one a little bit, so on the trellises in between the buildings, I still don't know what these things are technically called. I decided, hey, maybe this is some sort of vineyard. Maybe they grow fruit here. And by God, are the glowberry vines a versatile piece of decor. I can put them in the green zone, I can put them in the yellow zone, I could probably fit them in the orange zone if I wanted, and they'll just go anywhere. But mostly the yellow zone, because again, there's currently very few options for yellow in the game, and I'll take what I can get. There's a little bit of green in there, doesn't matter. There's going to be a little bit of green everywhere. That's how plants work. And in a couple places, maybe instead of berries, maybe some roots. Maybe those berries didn't grow so well. I appreciate that I seem to have just stopped and held still for about 20 minutes to give me an editing time to talk about these roots. I must have been on the phone or something. Move, dude, what are you doing? You're time-lapsing. And then a couple of berries on the inside as well, because, if you run a vineyard, it's probably not a sound idea to have to crawl out on a 3-meter trellis to try and pick berries during a major blight. You probably want to keep them inside. But let us not neglect our other only option for yellow, the wheat, which there are a couple of parts in the city where I'd like there to be wheat, but I can't have wheat because there's a wall or a trapdoor in the way, and for that, we just put down hay bales. Hay bales under the farmland, hay bales on top of the farmland, doesn't matter, nobody's going to look at it closely. Oh, you see that? You like that camera move? Yeah? Well, replay mod crashed 16 times trying to render that camera move, so it's never going to happen again, because it's stupid. Building! This one's pretty straightforward. The balcony is a little lower, and I think with the way that they're laid out, it's very difficult to jump from the balcony of the building next to it down, which I think is good. I think there are some buildings that they look like you should be able to jump between them, but you can't. It's a red herring. Sometimes you need those. And you see here I've learned my lesson. I'm not detailing the side of this building too much because there's a very good chance another one's going to go right next to it. It would have been nice if I learned that lesson 5 buildings ago, but whatever. And I use a technique here in a second where, and I keep forgetting to do this, I put the signs on the corners of the mud, and it kind of looks like there's, you know, slightly larger bricks or something jutting out. And I always keep forgetting to do this. I came up with it a while ago, and I just keep forgetting to find places to put it. There's a very interesting story behind the creation of this one, and I don't remember what it was, because I don't remember making this one. I had foolishly gone to get a flu shot a couple days prior, thinking perhaps, surely, this time technology has come far enough that it won't knock me off my feet for 1 to 3 days like every other time I've gotten a flu shot, and it did, immediately. And so I was out for quite some time, and because my symptoms were all just my immune system overreacting to a disease that wasn't actually there, treatment options were pretty much limited to knocking myself out in some sort of drug-induced coma for 16 to 48 hours. But I still had a building to make, so I made a building before it got too bad, and that's most of what I remember. Oh, and the quack doctor that stuck me with the needle also hit a nerve on the way through, so my whole arm was basically out of commission with or without the cold medicine. And I'm allowed to call him that for the record, because I also pretend to be a doctor in my spare time. Like I don't know a two-bit apothecary clerk in a lab coat when I see one. Anyway, yeah, so there's some orange in there, because it's the orange zone, and I guess I did some terraforming, and a torch flower, that's good, you like to see those. And again, I think the brown zone being lower down than the orange zone is going to help hide some of these minor accent details a little more with the vertical grade. We'll see. Now you'll notice I said 16 to 48 hours. This was still within that 48 hours, so I went for another very simple building that I could make with my eyes closed, because they mostly were. I switched up a couple of things here and there, but by and large, just your bog standard Moair building. Which I need to be clear, get your goddamn flu shots, people, because then if we get rid of the flu, then I don't have to get flu shots. I realize that's probably, you know, a kind of a loftier goal, but I mean, we can try, right? Surely? Can we just real quick, eliminate influenza completely so I'm not moderately inconvenienced every 11 to 13 months? I don't think that's so unreasonable. By this point, to be clear, it's not that I was feeling better. It's that the cold medicine was now impairing my judgment. But I started on something a little bit bigger. You may have noticed at several points, I just have camels, horses, donkeys, the occasional cow, skeleton horses just wandering loose in the city. I've managed to rope up a couple of them, but by and large, they are just out there. And by God, they had to go somewhere, so I figured it was time to put in the stables. In an ideal world, I do have separate buildings for horses and llamas and camels, but in the immediate, I just needed them off the street. And I did something very different here. I gave it an actual proper wooden roof, which I think it's a good accent. I'm a little concerned that I gotta plan for how the sight lines are going to affect it from the different zones, but I'd like to do more roofs. I just haven't found a good spot for it yet. But I've sketched up some designs that have like copper roofs in the green zone, and I think it looks pretty good. We'll see if I end up doing that elsewhere, or if this roof ends up being removed for consistency. But I think it's fine currently, and it gives us this little upstairs area as well for, I don't know, staple hands to take their smoke breaks in 2nd century BC Roman-occupied Carthage? I don't know. Now this fence, I think, is going to be a lot bigger once I figure out the exact delineation between the orange zone and the brown zone. But as it stands, it's there to indicate that this is a stable and there are horses out here. It's not really meant to be the final product. And because of power creep, it also doesn't keep camels in at all. They can just step right over. But fortunately, the door is small enough that camels can't fit out on their own. So they just stay inside. And here comes the caravan, except for a couple in the back, because leads are dumb, and their pathfinding is even worse. And here come the camels, which, yeah, don't fit through the door. Had to bust it out and sort of push them in. I don't know what the problem is. I can't open the replay for this one, so I'm gonna do a cool transition. Whoa, there it is. Look at that. It's a fairly straightforward building. I think of all of the time lapses to lose, I think I'm the most okay with this one. Ditching replay mod the first chance I get, though. This is compounding issue number 17. Flashback wouldn't do this to me. And now this one I would have been mad if I'd lost. This was the big one. So as I've probably reiterated about 6 times now because nobody ever listens to me. You can pulverize dripstone blocks to make sand. And right now I need a lot of sand because I need to make a lot of glass bottles because I'm trying to store a lot of XP in Dragon's Breath. And of course, Aang does sell sand, but when I say sell, I mean he gives it away for free, and I would feel bad taking all of the sand that I need in the quantities that I need because it would clear him out. And he makes you fill out a form, which I'm not big on. So I'm opting for a more renewable source that doesn't, how do I put this, exploit the unpaid labor of a Peruvian immigrant. That's just bad optics. Now, the thing about dripstone farms is that dripstone grows very slowly, so to get any amount of it in any reasonable amount of time, they gotta be pretty big, and I was not particularly keen to build a, 18 by 18 giant mud box, so I busted out the fabricator and I went to go get a sandwich. Why I didn't bust out the fabricator when I was doped up on cold medicine, I don't know, but here we are. Now this does cut a little bit into the side of the basalt farm, but again, Moer is a city of buildings stacked on top of buildings. I think I'm okay with that. And I tested a number of dripstone farms in Creative and worked out that they all had to be sort of a specific height. And I designed this exterior around the assumption that that specific height would be roughly lining up with where the quote-unquote floors are of each of these levels of arches. And what I didn't realize was that I had in fact miscounted. I had sort of operated under the assumption that I could waterlog rails and have hopper minecarts pick up the dripstone. Apparently waterlog blocks don't count for growing dripstone. It has to be actual regular water sources. So this whole thing, to be clear, this whole thing that you're looking at right now is fine. It's the insides that I had to rip out and replace several times to make it fit, because it seemed easier than ripping out the outside and putting it back, and I'd already made the time lapse, so, what are you going to do? I also slightly miscounted the outside. It's a little bit wider than it is long, I guess, and it's some of the windows are uneven. But again, I'm fine with that. Moer is again a city of buildings that were not planned correctly, and I actually didn't also make the farm because it takes a ton of dripstone, but I did put in where I thought the first layer was going to go, and I think this did stay there. It's just the positioning of the other layers that had to change. I stole a bunch of this dripstone from Dewey because Dewey has a lot of dripstone because the quote-unquote museum that's never going to be finished is in a dripstone cave biome, and nobody's going to notice if 20 stacks of it go missing at any point. And after all that, it should surprise no one that I opted for something a little less grandiose and in your face. I've generally avoided developing this area because, as you can see, it requires me clearing out a large chunk of hill, but I wanted to start developing the area behind the bamboo farm and the storage room, mostly because there's large chunks missing from the skyline where you can just see hill and clouds, and I'm not a huge fan of that, but B, I had the idea of putting in an actual garden somewhere in the green zone, and I think back behind the bamboo, we've already got some planters in there, and I might just expand that out to be a little bit bigger, and having this building would sort of be a corner of the wall, I think, is my main idea. And this is where the sniffer paddock used to be, so this is probably going to ultimately end up being the Bogart Memorial Garden or something, because I'm going to have to, I am eventually going to have to move the Bogart Memorial Lightning Rod as this area becomes more developed, but we can cross that bridge when we come to it. And this was actually one of the few buildings that I had kind of worked out ahead of time in Creative. This was another of my test sketches when I was designing sort of the general vibe of the city. And I adapted it to fit a little bit better in this area. Most of the pieces are similar. They've just sort of been shuffled around. And we're back to the border between the yellow and the green zone. I planted these fairly early on in the project. I just didn't have a good building to put around them, so they've just been sitting there for quite some time. But sunflowers are a surprisingly good transition block between green and yellow, with specifically the way that the green and yellow zone are laid out. Because from every angle but this one, they are just green, and this is the only angle where you can see the yellow part. So if you're looking through the window in the green zone, you just see green. Now, of course, when I change the ground around them, that's going to be a little different, but, we can exist in this nice moment for a little while. I don't think that's too much to ask. And then we flash forward almost 3 weeks, and I'm finally putting a building in there, but for you it was like 2 seconds, so it's insignificant. But this one's going in across from the building that I'm using for my house, which is not strictly speaking my house. It's some Carthaginian's house that I've moved into. Or is it? And this one is another fairly straightforward one. It's, you know, it's right outside my window. I don't want it to be some weird experimental thing. I want a building I can rely on. There's nothing in this one, of course. It's pretty much just there as a line of sight blocker and a thing to jump from my balcony onto if necessary. But they don't all have to be winners, as we've established. But it's right outside my window, so it also can't be a loser. And see here, watch, I'm learning. I've identified that this balcony is a little too close to the ground and a little too tall, and I've actually gone in and I've fixed it, instead of just leaving it there for future me to deal with. And speaking as the one that is now future me, I'm pretty mad about that. So thanks, Pumpkinhead. You saddled me with like 40 buildings I gotta fix. And of course, it's not a building in Moair if we don't redo the central design 15 times and then ultimately replace it with a balcony. And I was over here working on putting a fence around the sunflower garden on this side, and I hit on something interesting that I think I'm going to be reusing a lot more in the city. Not the slabs. Don't do the slabs. The slabs don't work. There we go. It's just mud brick walls and then flower pots on them as like fence post caps. I think that design is going to be coming up quite a bit in the future. Not here, obviously. This is completely unrelated. I just didn't have cover footage for the end of the last clip. As I predicted, another building going in here, and this one I think ultimately does end up being the end of this street, because we're coming up on where the corner of the bee farm is, and if we want a road going there, then that's probably going to need to go somewhere along that line. So, of course, now that this actually is the last building on the row, I don't really put a lot of detail into the sides, but a little bit on the front. I've got a balcony that you again can't jump to, and some sort of lattice there. Maybe a plant at one point grew along that, and I went with a bamboo awning here because I keep trying the wool, and the yellow is just too bright, and an oxeye daisy because again, few options for yellow flowers. But by this point, it was October 28th, and I was still technically one building behind. So I decided that it might be best to fudge it once again, and rather than building a whole new structure from scratch, revisit the smeltery and try and make that an actual complete building instead of a hollow shell with some pillars and a hole that things go in to burn. And, you know, looking at the finished product, I ultimately don't know if I would consider what I did to be finishing the smeltery. I think I added a second floor, as you will see over the course of this time lapse, but I think it needs a third because it's quite a bit shorter than some of the surrounding buildings. It's the same height as the kitchen next to it, but you know, this might call into question that maybe the kitchen needs a proper third floor and a proper second floor. So who knows? But I'm gonna say that both of these are done within the confines of my challenge, so bite me, non-believers. I make the rules. But I mean, at the bare minimum, I've put walls and a ceiling on an important part of the structure that did not previously have walls and a ceiling, which is to say the input area. So, I mean, I can live with that. And yeah, this is one of the reasons why I don't think I'm fully happy with what I did. I went back and forth on this raised part a lot, and my original intention was to have chimneys on the raised part there, and I kind of lost the plot with it, and I don't know what the hell it is now. So that's one of the things one of the driving reasons I feel compelled to go back and revisit this is this bit in the middle here. I'm not overly thrilled with how that turned out. It also makes putting a ceiling on the interior difficult because it's at 2 different levels, and it looked better in my head. Is the justification I'm going to go with, and nobody can prove otherwise because they don't know what it looked like in my head. Day 29 and slowly losing momentum, but there's sort of a plaza area something over by the dripstone farm, and I had an idea for a building with pillars, and that was about as far as I got, and it didn't get better from there. Again, this is another one of those, I tried too many things at once, and it came out looking like it had the structural fortitude of, and I quote, a Cadbury creme egg. So this one is also definitely going to need a rework. This was a frantic dash to the finish line, and also Zacticon showed up while I was in the middle of building it, so I didn't really finish it either. But on the bright side, we did meet a very interesting man who came by to rixel some shell pads, apparently. Would you like to do the honors?
What does it say at the top left? What's that menu called? Does it just say like trades?
The one that says trades?
Okay.
What does it say for you?
It says Rixels.
Well,
Rixles.
And at that point, I was just sort of in a rush to finish the building so that I could move on to the building that I needed Zacticon to be there to finish. Because, again, this was like one of 2 times he'd been on this month, so had to get that out of the way. And as the bee farm is not just the bee farm, but also where Zacticon's bed is probably going to end up, I gave him broad discretionary powers in how he chose to design the remainder of this building. And I would bring you some words from the man himself, but it turns out in retrospect that we were mostly just sending each other reference pictures and not actually going into detailed verbal description of what the things would look like, because we were both looking at the same picture and then just trying to replicate that. But the main things that stood out were the idea of, as you can see going in here, the sort of load-bearing window that would be holding up the balcony of the second floor. And the second floor itself would likely be some sort of a lounge or study that would then have a staircase leading up to the much larger third floor. That, as with many of these buildings, will of course be decorated later, but just be aware that the idea is there. And the ultimate conceit of this building that we worked out was that this was likely some sort of governor's manor or other wealthy individuals' estate, thus accounting for the lavish architecture that at some point during the great blight of Moer fell victim to just a hornet's nest, essentially a large colony of swarming insects. Perhaps in a blight scenario where fertile soil would be a luxury item, the governor in his folly believed that he could keep some potted plants in his house, and this, being the only source, attracted the pollinators in droves to his basement and drove him and his bourgeois family to the streets. But of course now in the modern era, during the excavation of Moer, Oriolantovic, master of bees, was able to move in and make himself quite comfortable. And my final solo contribution to the building was adding the honeycomb motif along the top, and then building a little too low and being unconfident in my ability to recreate it higher up, just pushing it with a piston. But I think it's subtle enough that it's not too distracting, but also, you know, if you look at it closely, you can see that it is distinctly a pseudo-hexagonal pattern. And this one's actually a hexagon, and not the thing that I kept calling a hexagon earlier, which was an octagon. And with that, we moved on to the last day of the project. It was, of course, at this point Halloween, and so I decided while everyone was sleeping, I was going to go in and change all the biome foliage color so that it looked a little bit more like autumn. And you know, the bird plate looked fantastic, and you can see a lot of what Casey's been doing in some of these spots too. He's put in a bridge, he's put in a blacksmith. Lucky's house has been torn down 3 more times. Usual stuff in the bird plate. Moer did not have quite the same aesthetic luck, unfortunately. Turns out that when you choose a biome based solely on the ability of the grass and leaf color to blend with the other blocks in your palette, that changing the grass and leaf color makes it look really bad. And when that grass color was chosen specifically to blend with the leaf color in a biome where there are no trees, well, it's worse. But we're not here to watch grass die, we're here to make a building, and I'm sure it will surprise no one that I have saved the biggest one for last. And at this point, I think I've talked enough, so I'm just going to let the monolith speak for itself. Okay, I'm done. Okay, my ridiculous Herculean labor that I regretted immediately is over. I have built, we're going to say 31 buildings in 31 days, even though I got a little out of sync and skipped the first 2 days and so had to kind of add extra buildings after that. And Halloween is over and the grass color has mercifully returned to normal. It looked fine in the bird plate, but when you're out in the plains with no trees and you don't see the leaf colors, it just looks brown. So we are also now in 1.21.3, which means a couple of things. One, check this out. I can change the sound that food makes when you eat it, which is exciting. Two, this is a big one. I don't know if this is going to work 100%, but I'm going to try. It's actually sending block updates, which it wasn't doing for some things previously. That's probably normal. So that's going to be useful. That works on most things that you can rotate. And three, I can finally do this. Was that so hard? Apparently. We are swiftly approaching an hour here, though, in this current draft. So I'm gonna do a quick recap from ground level, just in case there's any minor details you might not be able to see in a time lapse, and then I think we're gonna call it good there. So I have this fun thing. This was I can actually thank Casey for this. He sort of started on this path, and I realized that it could be engineered to actually work. You can jump up here, flip that trapdoor so that you can climb through the window, and pop up here, go along this edge. This is the tricky part. You have to jump onto this flower planter, skirt around, jump onto this pot. This is another building that I really struggled with, and I think I still need to revise a little bit because, again, it looks kind of hollow in a way that might fall over quickly. But anyway, you can jump over to here. And this is the room where I'm keeping all my trial chamber maps so that whenever I find a new one, I can compare it and know if it goes to one I've already been to. because that's a recurring problem with these. This is not the full extent of this building. This is just the first step up. This is going to be a lot taller. I just haven't hit on a design for the upper portions that I like quite yet. Perhaps towards the later stages of this project, we will have an opportunity to see those planned designs, but I've not yet made it work in a way that I like. It's proportionally very big compared to the rest of these buildings, which means that the level of detail has to be very granular, but also not so granular as to be indistinct, which is a tough balancing act to do. But, bare minimum, I'm fine with what I have now. There are a couple of buildings I think I need to go back and redo, but I think that one's fine. That one could be a little taller. But overall, and I mean, not every building is going to look great. You go somewhere like New York City, and half of the buildings just look bad. Now, of course, I live in a very rural area, and large urbanized, what I like to refer to them as, hellscapes, scare me, because I don't like not seeing trees. But that's beside the point. So who knows? I think some of these could use a little redesign. I feel like the plus shape on this sort of works from some angles and sort of doesn't from others, and I might want to revisit that. And also, it's not detailed on every side because I just wanted to get a facade on it that looked good, so I could again take a break. This redstone is more complicated than it needed to be because I wanted to have a button that did a quick pulse, and I think I kind of overcomplicated it in the telling. So I might go back and revisit that. And I think now that that project is over, misguided or not though it may have been, I'm going to go back to making larger, more impactful buildings like the mud farm. That's the mud farm. Or actually wiring up the larger, more impactful ones I've already made, like the dripstone farm or the bamboo farm or the bone meal farm. Which actually, I mean, the bone meal farm works. It needs walls, which I meant to do and then forgot. So that is where we currently stand. I'm going to take a long break. Probably not actually, because if I take long breaks, then the demons come out. I can finally reprioritize the things that I wasn't prioritizing because they weren't buildings, I think is the exciting thing coming up. And we're going to see how that works out. Well, that's probably fine. Anyway, I'm going to take a break. Also, Christ, they're adding all these gray plants. I don't have a gray zone. I'm screwed. So that's going to be fun. Maybe I can stick them in part of orange zone. Maybe they're on the border between orange zone and brown zone because they look kind of dead. I don't know. Maybe I merge blue zone and aqua zone back together and I make a gray zone between these two. Who knows? I'm going to take a break now. I've been talking for 30 minutes and I probably can't use all of that because this shouldn't be that long of an episode. Also, it's probably going to be July by the time I finish this one, so the Halloween theme is going to be way off. Okay, get the hell out of here. Leave me to my azaleas. You know what? If nothing else, I got the edit done by June, so good for me. It's not going to come out in June. Whatever. You guys want to know why I hate the replay mod? Watch this. This isn't what I told it to do. I told it to go in a straight line. Instead it's doing a goddamn barrel roll into the abyss and coming back up. Now, was that really the best path you could have taken to get there? Alright, okay, wait for it. Okay, here we go. I'm asking it, to be clear, to go down to street level. Just kidding. Nope. Down we go. A little further. Yep, that's fine. Okay. Uh-huh. Yep. Off we go. Oh, outside the world. Okay. Let's just go to hell. Here we go. I want to be absolutely clear as well. I didn't rotate the camera. The camera is rotating on its own. I didn't touch it.